This is the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose, where I strategize with business owners on how to grow and scale their businesses to hit their income goals. This is episode 214 of the Influencer Entrepreneurs Podcast with Jenny Melrose. Today, we are diving into self-care tips for women business owners with Megan Porta. This is not your typical episode, though, where we're going to talk about self-care tips and we're going to tell you to take a bath or wash your hair. You're actually going to hear about a pretty funny story, too, that I share, where Megan just randomly pulled it out of me, and I told her that we were going into left field quickly for me to tell this story, but it's one for the books. I'm telling you, you're going to want to listen into this. Before you do that, though, I want to make sure that you hop over to the show notes and grab my revenue planning growth guide. This guide is going to walk you through setting yourself up for 2021 and making sure that you hit your revenue goals, setting it up so that you actually have goals that you can look at with projects and tasks that are going to help you hit those goals. And as you're going to hear, Megan had a huge year in 2020, which I know for many of us sounds kind of crazy because we've dealt with a lot. But here's what I want you to understand. We have dealt with a lot in 2020. She put self-care tips in place for herself so that she could continue to move forward, because that's what it is all about. 2021 is about being resilient and taking what you have learned and knowing how strong you are because you did survive 2020 to be able to make 2021 the best year yet. Make sure that you hop over and grab the growth planner, and I will walk you through this interview. Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good, Jenny. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you. I am so excited to chat with you. Before we dive in, though, can you introduce yourself and your businesses?
Of course. So I am Megan Porta. I am a food blogger over at Pip and Ebby. I've been food blogging for over 10 years now. So I've been doing it for quite a while. And just a few years ago, I just had this, I found this passion for helping food bloggers find success, whatever that means for them. So I started a podcast. So I'm also podcast host at Eat Blog Talk, which is a podcast helping food bloggers find value in their businesses. And we also put a big focus on just taking care of us, because food blogging, as you know, blogging in general is just, it's no joke. It requires a lot of energy and time. So putting a focus on that has been a really big passion of mine. And I just have a passion for helping not just food bloggers, but entrepreneurs, especially women, discover success without totally taxing themselves. I know you have a huge focus on this as well, Jenny. And it's just like, I just feel like this is a message we need to share. We don't have to burn ourselves out in order to find success. So that is a massive passion of mine.
And I am really excited about this conversation because it is something that I am extremely passionate about. And I can see in the background all your beautiful drawings and pictures that your kids have done. So you are awesome a mom. So I think that also adds another layer to all of this as business owners. So, and especially over, I feel like the past year, we've really needed to do more self-care than anything else. But many of us have actually been acting from a place of survival with COVID and quarantining and all the craziness. So why do you believe self-care tips for women business owners are so vital?
Well, first of all, being a woman entrepreneur is taxing, as I mentioned. Women entrepreneurs do so much. And I know so many women entrepreneurs, and everyone I know is extremely dedicated to their businesses. They work so hard and they're so passionate about their work and their people and their communities, whatever it is they have created. And as you mentioned, some of these women are also mothers and wives, and they have a circle of friends that they have to pay attention to, which stretches them even further. And then you mentioned COVID, throw in a stressful pandemic, a quarantine, And for some, like me included, I have had to do unexpected homeschooling with my kids. So all of that adds this massive layer of complexity and honestly, a little bit of stress. So yes, like you said, Jenny, this can cause women to function from a place of survival, which means no extra anything, basically, no extra energy to pour into our businesses, no extra energy for ourselves, no extra energy for our families. And I believe that a good way to pull out of this situation is to implement small acts of self-care. And it might seem counterintuitive to some to crawl out from a place of just scraping by focusing on you, because as you know, women want to take care of everyone else first. We often put ourselves last, and we put our children first and our husbands first, and so many other things ahead of ourselves. But if you can actually get to the point where you can focus on you for a little bit, it works magic. Even taking just really simple steps toward taking care of yourself will go a really, really, really long way. And I just want to stress that today. And just a few examples, like 5 to 15 minutes. I mean, it doesn't have to be much time, spending time doing little bits of things for yourself, whether that's exercise or relaxing with a book, whatever your definition of relaxing is. It really adds up. It will fill you up. It will give you energy to go above and beyond that place of just scraping by with your kids, with your work, with everything. Because scraping by, I have been there. It is not a good place to be. It is not a productive place to be. Everything good disappears. Your creativity disappears. Your energy goes away. You're not productive. You're not a good mom. All of that stuff is just, it's like a cycle of bad things. So if we as women owners are not implementing regular acts of self-care for ourselves, especially during times like this is such a weird year, we will not have that energy to make strides in our businesses. And I just believe that it is absolutely vital to prioritize self-care right now, both for just our sanity and also to preserve our businesses.
Yes. And I love the fact that you kind of almost hand in hand put together productivity and self-care. Because if you look out on the market right now, a lot of the business books that are out there, they're all written productivity-wise from a man's standpoint. And It's always interesting to me because I'm kind of like, let me see what he's going to tell me. Oh, he's going to tell me to eat the same thing, wear the same thing, and really block off my time to give myself 10 hours of work day. When that's not our reality. That doesn't exist. Sure, I can eat the same thing and wear the same colored clothes, but otherwise, that's not what we deal with. We're always trying to think of the next step. Oh, wait, we've got Christmas gifts coming up, and we need to do this, or who's got to go to this after school activities. We're always on to the next thing. So I really do love that you connected self-care with productivity, because that almost makes it less selfish, because I think that's part of the problem too. We hear self-care and we think, I'm being selfish. I'm honing in on just me. So you quickly mentioned a couple examples of self-care. Can you talk just a couple more just suggestions you would make when it comes to self-care, things that we could be doing?
Yes, I do have some ideas for that. First, I was wondering if I could tell you just a little bit about kind of how I came to this point this year, because 2020 was a really transformational year for me in this arena. And I would love to kind of frame that leading up to a few of my suggestions, because I think it kind of just helps to show that I truly have transformed, and I've been there, and I've seen a few of the little things that I'm going to mention actually work. So is it okay if I do that?
Love that. Oh, okay. Absolutely. Of course.
Okay. So last spring, it was toward the end of that really strict stretch of quarantine. So I think it was the end of May. We had been at home for months and I hadn't gone anywhere, had no new work projects on my plate, really nothing new. I was just kind of doing the normal life routine. And I realized that I was super frazzled, and not frazzled in the sense of I I've been at home alone for months on end, but frazzled, like I was just burnt out. And I realized that this made absolutely no sense because I hadn't been doing anything. As I mentioned, like it was way pared down from my normal amount of stress. So I took a step back and I was like, okay, this is not normal and something is wrong here and I need to fix something. And I've always been a huge proponent of self-care, but I didn't realize that I had been neglecting myself. And I actually had been doing this to an extreme level. So I just took a step back. I evaluated my priorities and I realized that I needed to make some changes. So I decided to make a few changes and I knew I needed to keep up with them consistently and take them really, really seriously. And the changes that I made seem really simple, but for me, they were so massive and they made a huge impact. So what I did, this was like June 1st of this year, I did a few things. So I stopped checking email on my phone, which seems like maybe it's not a big deal, but for me, it was a huge deal because I was a massive email addict, especially on my phone. I would be one of those people at the store who was like in line opening my email. And then I'd be like, what am I doing? What am I looking for? Why am I looking through my email right now? So doing that was a really big deal for me. And it was so hard. Those first few weeks, I remember like almost like muscle memory. I'd grab for my phone and be like, I need to, wait, it was like an addiction. So I did that. I stopped Facebook completely unless it was related to business. I also started putting my computer down at a certain time every day. So 5:00 p.m. rolled around and I would literally close my laptop. I would put it in my bedroom and I started putting my phone in my bedroom too. And then I started scheduling time on social media that related to work. So I would do like Instagram still, but I would do it during the day during a predetermined time frame. So I made all of those changes and it was so hard, Jenny. I mean, those first few weeks and months were like, I really truly feel like I was addicted to technology, which is so weird because I didn't realize that I had gotten to that point, but I did it and I consistently kept up with all of those changes. And after 3 months, I noticed really huge differences in my life. So I guess, and I can get into that in a little bit, but my main piece of advice would be to, and this is so easy, yet so hard, but just make one tiny change that is good for your soul because it's going to be different for all of us. And for me, it was setting all that tech down and make a commitment to just really sticking to it. And just like sit down with yourself and figure out what that is. Maybe it's something entirely different. Maybe you don't have a reliance on technology like I do. But you just have to like be honest with yourself and figure out that first thing and just do it. Like put it in your calendar, get accountability from your family. I did that too. So I shared with my husband and my boys. I have 2 boys. And I was like, here's what I want. I want to be done working at 5:00 every night. If I'm not, literally come shut my computer and grab my shirt sleeve and pull me away because I feel so strongly about my work. I love it. I can just keep going and going. And I needed somebody to hold me accountable. So that's a big one. Find someone in your life, even if it's a friend who texts you every day for the first 2 weeks that you're making this change, to ask you and to keep up with you and just make sure you're staying on top of it. So that is my biggest piece of advice. Also, you could add little things to your day that are helping. So like going on walks, taking a nap. I don't know. I love naps. Going to bed early, that would be a great one for me because I tend to I can stay up 10 minutes later and then 10 minutes later. Before I know it, I'm exhausted. Like I said, stopping work at a certain time like I did. And just keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be this grand display. You don't have to add like 10 things to your life suddenly. It just has to be one thing. And it has to ensure that it's going to reveal a better you. It's going to be good for your soul over time. And also something that you're just not going to give up on. So that is my single most important and easiest piece of advice.
I cannot agree with you more on the fact about boundaries. And I never honestly thought of it in the light of it being self-care. But I think that definitely is part of the reason that I didn't feel totally crazy is I did have those boundaries in place. And I think part of the issue is that many of us started off hustling, right? We would work on our blogs while we were sitting in front of the TV. We were doing it as a side hustle, just trying to make, I was still a teacher at the time. We did it whenever we could. And we took those habits of hustling and took it over to even when we're doing this full time, and that's what we're doing. So having those boundaries are just so important. Knowing that email that's going to come in can wait until tomorrow or can wait until you have that scheduled time for answering emails or for answering DMs on Instagram. I feel like setting up those boundaries for yourself, especially after the year that we've had, not only with COVID, but also with the election, and just there was so much, and it was just hard not to get pulled into the emotion of it all and get triggered. It just made it, it was a year. Let's just say
it was a year. There was so much, right? I mean, on a normal year prior to 2020, I mean, being a woman entrepreneur is hard in itself, but this year it was just insane. And if you've come out on the other end feeling even relatively sane, I commend you because it was a rough one. I love what you said, Jenny, about how we all started this kind of like, computers in our laps at night or whatever, like hustling, like just getting to business and getting stuff done. And how over time it changes, but maybe we don't even realize it changes. That is what happened for me, and why I think that technology addiction sneaked up on me, because I didn't even realize that it happened. I did years and years and years of that laptop in my lap, in the evenings. And then before I knew it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm working all the time. So I think that that's a normal progression for all of us. And we just need to be aware that it either has happened or that it can happen, and just like keep that on your radar because it's a super real thing.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I can say that the number one sign for me that boundaries needed to go into place was I was thinking that I was developing Alzheimer's because I was forgetting things. I couldn't remember what I had just done 10 minutes before. I would leave things places. And I remember saying to my husband, something's not right. And it just felt like I was spinning too many plates and I was bound to drop something. It was always that sense of overwhelm. And once we looked at it and said, okay, we're working in a 12-hour day and in just nonstop, and we're jumping from one thing to the next. So I would forget what I had just been doing because I was jumping into the next thing, trying to put out all the fires. And putting in those boundaries, making a schedule, being more productive really, truly helped. So you kind of have talked about almost the examples that you gave were in different categories, I feel like, because I think when we think self-care, immediately everyone goes to, oh, I'll take a bath, or, oh, I'll wash my hair. And that's not what we're talking about here, which I love. So you mentioned obviously the boundaries, which I think is like the greatest thing. If you take one thing from this episode, you all need to make sure that you take that and start trying to set those up for yourself. What would be other categories that you would kind of think about when you talk about self-care?
Well, yeah, I think time is a huge one for me. So just being really intentional with my time, honestly, that sets the stage for absolutely everything. Setting routines in your life, because when you are stressed and triggered by something in life, if you don't have those habits and routines to fall back on, it is so hard to do good things for yourself. I mean, I just so strongly feel that that's one of the most important things you can do. I have a really solid morning routine, and it has helped me tremendously over the years, because there are plenty of times when I'm just like, I give up. This is too much. I can't do this business stuff. And then I start in the morning, I go exercise and I, get on with my routine. And then by the end of it, I'm like, oh, I feel better, because it's just like this habit. It's like a groove. You just do it and you keep going. So I think that has been really helpful. And I love that you mentioned like, oh, taking a hot bath. Like everyone thinks that like self-care equals baths and like massages and pedicures. And yeah, maybe it does. Maybe for you, like once a week, that would fill you up and give you energy. I think that's great. I actually love hot baths as well, but that's not what I look at first as far as self-care goes. So there are so many different categories, and I think it's going to be different for everybody. Like exercise is a really good one. Spending time outside in nature, that is so overlooked, and it's an underrated category because I don't know, I feel kind of weird saying this, but like just sitting outside sometimes for 5 minutes and just like watching the fact that there's like this whole world going on, and it's a miracle. Like these birds are communicating, and I mean, it's just like such a simple thing, but it can really help you feel grounded and just kind of give you a big picture of the world. Like it is not all about you. It's not all about your business. There are bigger things to think of. So yeah, those are kind of my main things that I like to go back to when I'm needing to think about self-care.
So this is going to totally take this a different direction than what I expected it to be, what you just said. And it really hit home for me because the nature thing, we live in a new neighborhood, and one of the neighborhood across the street isn't quite as developed. And there is this upper part where everybody that listens to my podcast probably knows I have a fear of birds, don't like them. And my fear comes, I'm telling you, this is going to take us sideways real quick here, but I'm going to do it. My grandmother always had an African gray parrot in her house that she would just let fly around the house. Oh. And it would whistle at you and it would cuss at you. And I just,
oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
The funny part, the way that this all connects is my grandmother actually just recently passed over Thanksgiving. Oh. And I, after finding out, went for a walk across the street with my dog and in nature, watching the birds. And it was almost kind of like that deep breath of that connection that you did. It kind of like calmed me, as much as I hate the birds. That kind of connection to nature. I just think things like that are so, don't think that, but when you have that moment of actually being out in nature and experiencing that, it definitely does affect you like that for sure.
And once you start noticing it, you notice it more, I found too. Like if you, like your thing with the bird, you notice that, and now it's probably going to be on your radar more. I do the same thing, like I had this weird thing with birds a while ago, and I told a good friend of mine, I was like, I think the birds are following me. And she was like, Megan, are you feeling okay? But it was so weird. Like birds would like run into our front window every day for like 3 weeks. And I was like, what is going on? The birds. So then it was like, all I saw were these weird bird situations. So yeah, once it's on your radar, but I love your story about that. That's really funny how it kind of came full circle.
Yes. It always
can be annoying, and they can poop on you too. So
yes, no, I've never been a big fan. They are beautiful to watch from a distance where I know they can't poop on me or come buzz my ear like one used to. So let's talk a little bit about these self-care tips and how they've actually helped your business. Yeah. What have you seen has been like the biggest difference in your business? I'm assuming obviously we kind of talked about stress level, but along those lines as well.
Oh, so many things. So I mentioned that story about how I just knew I needed to take better care of myself. And then I made those changes. And so I just want to mention first that it not only affected my business, but first I noticed changes in my personal life. So I like to mention that because, as you know, like personal and business just like tie in together. They bleed over into each other. So if one is affected, the other is affected. So first of all, my personal life changes. I noticed that every single relationship in my life was not just improved, but like substantially improved. I have never had a better relationship with my husband. We've been married for almost 14 years. My kids, like I have more patience and grace with them. I am just like everyone all around, my friendships, everything. So that was huge. Getting better sleep was a big one for me because I've never been a good sleeper, especially in the early morning. So that has been really huge. Getting good sleep, as you know, helps absolutely everything in your life. And then just overall, I've been making better decisions in business. And then like, as far as like what I put into my body and things like that. And just so much more mental freedom and overall happiness. And this is, I feel a little bit selfish saying this, but 2020 has been my happiest year of my life. And I feel really grateful to be able to say that, because I know that not many people probably could, but literally, Jenny, like those changes that I made last summer changed my life. And I know that sounds super dramatic, but it is 100% true. So, okay, so that was like all the personal stuff. And then as far as my business goes, this is what I did not see coming. I knew it would probably affect my business in positive ways. But I have seen so many great changes. Number one, I finally broke through to making six figures for the first time in my entire 10 years of being an entrepreneur, which was huge. And I didn't even realize it until a few months ago. I just sat down and did the math and I was like, I wonder if I made six figures in the past year. And sure enough, I did. So that is a huge one for me. I also started noticing that opportunities were literally falling into my lap. Like, one of the things I always say to food bloggers is that I never work with brands because I just have never liked it. Well, this big brand, like sponsored situation fell into my lap and I ran with it, and it was super lucrative and it was just like fulfilling. So things like that were happening left and right. And it was just kind of like magic. Like, I feel like if I hadn't cleared open that space for things to come in, that none of that stuff would have happened. Also, just all of these really smart, inspiring peers and now friends started coming into my life in ways that I just never would have expected. And I've learned so much from them. There are like so many people that I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so smart. And thank you for talking to me. And it's just been crazy. I've also had just a lot of extra clarity about the projects that I'm working on, what I should be focusing on, what is going to move my business forward, what goals I should be focusing on and creating for my business, et cetera. And I didn't even realize this was happening, but during that time, like during all of that time, during the summer and then after, I was also diversifying my revenue streams, which is kind of funny because looking back, I see like, oh yeah, I added this and this and this. But in the moment, I wasn't intentionally trying to make that happen, but I think I have like 9 different streams of revenue now, which is 8 more than I had last year. So that was big. And all of this happened with so much less time working, so much less energy spent, more time with my family. I actually took July entirely off of work and still all of this transpired. And my business has just exploded. So a lot of really, really good things have come from this.
I love that you started with the personal, because I think that that's a conversation I have a lot of times with any of my coaching clients or mastermind clients, is that you have to be on the same page. You have to be able to communicate with your family, and it has to be done in a way that it's not coming from resentment. And I think as women, we can have a tendency of holding things on our shoulders and not speaking up and having that conversation of like, listen, I'm trying to do this. I need help here. We just assume that they can read our minds, and they can't. So I think the fact that it helped your personal relationships is huge, because it's so tied together. It's not even funny. And then of course, obviously the business side of things, amazing. So when you're talking as well, like we've talked a little bit about productivity. Do you also feel that time management is tied to self-care as well?
Oh, 100% yes. I mentioned this a little bit before, but I think managing your time well and efficiently is the absolute best way to ensure that you're taking care of yourself. 100%. I think if you can get that down, everything else will be easier, and you can implement so much more self-care in your life in different ways. So I do have a couple time management tips. I have 2 main ones that I would love to share, if that's okay. Please. Okay, so number 1 is create a time log. And I started doing this about a year ago, I think I heard it on a podcast. Someone mentioned trying it. And I was like, are you kidding? I don't want to take the time to log my time. That's such a waste of time. which is ironic, right? But this tip is gold because when I did it, it was the most revealing thing about my time and the way I was spending it. And if you don't know how you're spending your time, you can't ever make changes to the way you're spending your time. So this is really important. So I recommend just logging your time for between 3 and 7 days. The longer, the better, because then you can get better glimpses of like what happens in the span of an entire week. But if it's super annoying and you don't want to do 7 days, do at least 3. And this will give you a good glimpse. And just write absolutely everything out that you do. And I'm talking like super detail, like not just like working, but put in, I spent 20 minutes on replying to emails. I did an interview for 45 minutes, like super, super detailed. And then when you're done, you review it, you analyze it. And I promise you are going to be shocked by the amount of time you spend on certain things and also by the amount of time you don't spend on things. And I had like 2 things that were really alarming to me the first time I did it. I spent so much time on email. Again, I told you I was an email addict. And I didn't spend any time with my husband. So those 2 things were like the first, like, whoa, that needs to change. So I really recommend doing this. There's an app called Toggle. It's spelled Toggl, I believe. But that's what I use. And it's super easy. You can actually sync from your desktop to your phone. So you can like, if you're out and about, you don't have to remember it. You can just like type in driving to school or whatever. And then when you get home, you can just sync it. And then it gives you this detailed report. And at the end of the time you're doing it, you're like, whoa, it's all like color coded and everything. So it's really cool. Or if you don't like that, you can just do like a Google spreadsheet, or just take like a little notebook with you wherever you go. But I really, really highly recommend doing this because it's, like I said, it's super revealing and you can make really good changes in your life. And my second tip is to just be a super fierce protector of your time. And I always have this image that I like to convey. It's like building a fortress around certain things that you do. So for myself, I imagine like this really thick rock wall that's really tall. And I just put that fortress around myself when I'm trying to protect my work time and when I'm trying to protect time with my family. So that means like saying absolutely no to any distractions. Also, planning ahead so that you can be super efficient when you do sit down to work. So, no sitting down, not knowing what you're going to be. I know that you're a huge proponent of this too, Jenny, but when you sit down, you better know exactly what you're going to be doing. You're not getting up. You're not doing laundry. You are not letting the dogs in and out. You're not, it's just like none of that. Like if you are sitting down, you have that wall around you. It's sturdy. You can't let anything in. Nothing is coming out. You are working. And that also goes for time away from work. So if you really, really want time in the evenings with your family or with friends, protect that time as well. So put your work down during that time. Don't allow anything else in there as well. And then also just make sure you're like super engaged with all of it. And I do have a few tips for just making sure that happens, like being a time protector is actually happening. So spending time planning before your work week begins is always a huge one for me. And it does not have to take that much time. You could spend like 10, 15, 20 minutes on a Sunday or a Saturday. Figure out what you have to do that week, get it on paper, get it on your calendar. And then before each day begins, so whether that's like the night before or at the end of your workday, think about the following day. So if you have 4 hours to work tomorrow, figure out exactly what you need to do and just like get it on your calendar, get it in your mind so that you know exactly what you're going to do. So that when you do start working, you're set. All of your distractions are pushed aside and you are just working. And then I was going to mention also Parkinson's law, which you're probably familiar with, Jenny, which is work expands to fill the time available for its completion. And I love this law because if you experiment with it, which I've done, You can get so much work done when you have like a set amount of time to do it. So if it takes you, for example, 4 hours, I don't know, to write a blog post, test it out and see if you can actually get that same task done in 2 hours. And if you can, go down to an hour and a half. And if that works, go down to an hour, because you would be blown away with what you can do when you like squish your time together and actually give yourself a timeline to do it. There are a few really good business books out there that focus on this. The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, he talks about that a lot. And then there's a newer one called The 5-Hour Workday by Stefan Arstall, I believe. That one is very inspiring. So if you're inspired to do something like this, like really squish in a massive amount of work in a small time, read those 2 books. So yeah, those are my main time management tips.
I love it. So good. Yeah. Another one is Mike McAlwitz has a book out too. I'm trying to see if it's on the back shelf, what it's called again. I don't remember, but it was also a productivity time management.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh gosh, what was that book?
Clockwork. There it is. I see it.
Yeah. That's a great one.
For sure. Well, Megan, where are the best places to connect with you?
Yeah. So you can just go to eatblogtalk.com to find out information about food blogging. And we have a community there as well. If you are a food blogger and want to just get connected and find tons of value in our podcast. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can reach me at megan@eatblogtalk.com. If you have any self-care or time management or food blogging things you want to talk about, I love talking about all of this. So please feel free to reach out. And then I am on Instagram at eatblogtalk or pip.ebby.
Perfect. Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with my audience. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was so fun. Thank you for having me, Jenny. It was such a pleasure.
All right. Well, there you have it. I hope you guys thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, because I have to tell you, I loved it. I love when conversations, interviews go off into left field and I'm able to share things that truly connect with me and have made a difference in my life, personal or business. And Megan clearly was able to help me do that and show you how that has worked out for me. As I said in the beginning, if you haven't already hopped over to the show notes and grabbed your revenue growth planning guide, make sure that you do. Let's make 2021 the best year yet. You can hop over and grab that. As always, I appreciate you guys so much for listening in. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, I would so appreciate it if you left a rating and review. It's really simple and easy to do. Just tell us what you think about the podcast. Tell us which guest was great and let us know how we can continue to improve it. All right, guys, until next time, I will see you all then.